Part 1. Prologue. Oath and Commission. I consider silence the most honest sound of the forge. In silence, metal does not lie, and even the warp does not immediately find the cracks between prayer and bolt. Today, the silence was taut, like a live wire. I felt it with everything in me that was still alive, and with everything that had long since become iron. The sanctuary of my operating chamber was never a place of light. Here, light serves as a knife. It cuts what is needed out of the dark and leaves the rest in shadow where it belongs. I check sterility, not for cleanliness, but for discipline. Cleanliness belongs to Mars. Discipline belongs to those who survived its dogmas. They placed a bundle on the table, wrapped in gray cloth soaked with oil and blood. I do not ask who brought it. The courier's name does not matter. What matters is that the bundle was carried in gloves, and then they still wipe their hands on a sleeve. People wipe their hands like that when they bring not merchandise, but an accusation. I peel the cloth away, and a smell meets me that should not exist in a machine shrine. Not rot, not scorched flesh. The smell of a page held close to fire for a long time, yet never allowed to burn. Under the cloth lies a strip of skin, not a scroll and not a trophy, more like a belt taken from the very idea that a body has a right to boundaries. The skin is dense as a soul and smooth as polished composite. Lines run along it like runes, but too precise for a runic hand. This is not writing. This is a schematic pretending to be a prayer. I do not believe in relics. I believe in functions and what works. I run a scanner along the lines. Empty. I change spectrum, change frequency. Empty. I feed current. Empty. Then I do the simplest thing. I remove my glove. The skin prickles under my fingers like fine shavings. I feel an old scar split along the pad of my finger. Blood beads. Reluctantly. But it beads. And in that same moment, the lines on the skin tremble. At first, it seems only my vision trembles. Then I understand the skin itself is shaking. The pattern does not flare with light. It becomes deeper, as if blood fills grooves that were not there a second ago. A drop falls on the edge and does not spread. It is drawn inward, like into a dry sponge. A new line appears on the surface. Not symbols and not letters, but pure structure. An order of commands calculated for flesh. I try to think coldly, the way I thought when I was faithful. Cut out emotion and leave calculation. But what rises in my throat is not fear and not rapture. It is a hunger that was called curiosity for too long. A relic asks for blood, which means it asks for payment. I do not ask who wrote this scheme. I ask why it chose me. I know my hands. They hold more memory than my face. These hands assembled servitors who had no right to a voice. These hands stitched muscle to a titan when the titan did not care who was inside. These hands stamped seals into metal as if a seal could replace truth. And yet, now truth lies on the table and behaves as if it has been waiting for me. A thought rises inside that I do not want to admit. If the scheme awakens to blood, then it knows what living is. It can distinguish living from dead. It can choose. I put my glove back on and realize that with this gesture I protect neither myself nor the strip. I protect the illusion of distance. The lines continue to deepen, as if an invisible stylus writes from within. I read the structure and see a sequence of stages. The first stage demands implantation with tissue, metal, entry angle, depth, and one more parameter that at first looks like an error. It does not describe the patient's body. It describes me. The scheme stops as if it is waiting for consent. I look at the tools, needles, clamps, saws, jars of reagents, syringes filled with what makes flesh obedient. All of it is my craft. All of it is my faith. I lean closer and see a tiny mark at the very edge. It resembles a bone. Too small to be a symbol, too precise to be an accident. The bone of the Omnissiah. I say it to myself, not as a prayer, but as a diagnosis, and in response, I feel a clean sensation, as if the scheme is smiling. I accept the commission not because I am paid, but because I want to see how the letter ends. The letter my blood is writing. Part 2. Patient 0. The first stitch. I needed a first carrier, so the scheme would stop being a promise and become a process. I do not seek volunteers. I seek material that is already agreed to any price. There is plenty of that in a forge world. Traitor warriors come to me as to a craftsman who can make pain useful. They bring their bodies the way one brings a weapon for repair, and I have always found it ridiculous and correct at the same time. Today, a body was laid on the table that still held itself together by rage. The bone beneath the armor was broken in a way that ordinary medicine would have answered with rest and death, and machine faith would have answered with amputation and replacement. I prefer a third path, the path where flesh pays iron and iron pays knowledge. I do not hear pleas, and I do not see faces. I see surfaces, tensions, voids, where support should be. I see that this man will be an ideal trial, because his body has long been living by the laws of war. The bone of the Omnissiah behaves differently when Chajaya flesh lies nearby. The lines on the skin grow warmer, as if the strip breathes. I lift the artifact into the light and notice the new line does not describe an implant as an object. It describes an implant as a link, a bridge, a stitch that holds not a cut, but a fate. I dislike that the scheme uses categories like that. I want to believe it is only a language convenient for manipulating me. I make the first incision. The patient's blood touches the artifact, and it does not soak in. It beads and rejects. The strip accepts only my blood. That is the first slap. The scheme is not merely reacting to biology. It recognizes an owner. I bring my finger close, cut an old scar, and let a drop fall beside the operative site. The lines deepen, and a clarification appears, as if someone is peering over my shoulder and correcting my movements. I stitch in a new node, an organic conductor braided with a cold alloy that should not exist by the dogmas of Mars. I watch the body accept it without the usual resistance. The patient does not relax. He only becomes heavier, as if his weight has finally matched his rage. The moment I secure the last stitch, the strip changes again. A line appears that was not there a minute ago. It lists the parameters of my breathing, my pulse, my concentration, as if the stitch was not in his body, but in my mind. I return to the scanner. Now it sees what used to be emptiness, but it sees only a shadow. Not data, but their silhouette. The artifact will not let me copy itself. It allows only obedience. This asymmetry irritates me. I am used to being the one who dictates terms with flesh and metal. Here, terms are dictated to me, and they do it with my own craft. Inside me begins the familiar argument that always ends in work. I tell myself it is a chance. I answer myself it is a trap. I tell myself a trap is also a chance if you know where the spring is. But I do not see the spring yet. I see only a text that opens exactly as far as I become part of its mechanism. Part 3. A lie to dogma. The forbidden component. The scheme demands material that cannot be obtained honestly. It is almost funny. In my world, honesty was replaced by precision long ago. It needs an organic conductor of a rare type, tissue that does not burn when it touches the warp, yet carries impulses the way a living nerve network does. Such a component is not grown in a laboratory. It is torn from reality. I open the Forge archives, not the ones stored on servers, but the ones stored in habits. I remember which of my suppliers brought things that should not exist. I remember the smells of containers by which one can tell contraband from trophy. The strip lies nearby, and each time I come close to the right thought, the lines on the skin grow clearer, as if the artifact nudges me with an elbow. I go out into the corridors of the Forge world, where metal is coated with oil and the walls listen. Everything here resembles a temple, built not for people but for machines. Yet people still come and leave blood on the floor, so the machines do not forget who feeds them. I do not walk quickly, because speed makes noise. Noise breeds curiosity. Curiosity breeds Chiji eyes. The scheme points me to a place and does it without arrows or signs. It simply rearranges the order of lines until I suddenly understand where to turn. I dislike how easily I accept the hint. I still call it calculation, but somewhere inside I know it is obedience. I find a container hidden among parts considered scrap. It is sealed with stamps, but the stamps are not made by Martian cannon. They are rough and confident, the seals of people who believe not in the Omnissiah, but in results. I break the seal, and inside lies tissue like a tendon. It does not tremble and does not breathe, but it holds tension. I raise the scanner and see it is living and dead at once, like everything best in my practice. I touch the strip. The bone of the Omnissiah takes my blood before it even beads. Intention is enough. A line appears that confirms the component is correct and adds a new instruction, as if the artifact is pleased by my obedience and decides to reward me with knowledge. I catch myself waiting for that reward. I hate that part of me. On the way back, I notice servitors in the corridors move differently. They do not look at me. They look through me, as if I have become part of the wall. That should be comforting. Invisibility has always been my talent, but today there is a synchrony in their movement that does not resemble routine, as if someone has given them a new rhythm. I return to the operating chamber and set the container on the table, the strip beside it like a judge. I know the next step will lead to an error, because any system that promises a perfect sequence always demands a sacrifice. The only question is whose. Part 4. An error in the prayer. A parasite in the code. I love pain when it is predictable. Predictable pain allows plans. Unpredictable pain turns craft into superstition. That day, the pain became unpredictable, not in the patient's body, But in the Forge's behavior, I completed the next stage. I stitched the forbidden component into the node that was meant to bind flesh and metal so they would stop arguing and begin negotiating. The patient's body accepted the link too easily. That is always a bad sign. When flesh accepts metal without resistance, it means someone has already negotiated with it earlier. A few hours later, my servitors began to make unnecessary movements. At first, small things. An extra turn of the head, an extra step, then repetition. They repeated the same action as if testing boundaries. I stopped one, jacked into his ports, and saw emptiness in the logs. Not errors, the absence of records. As if someone had learned to erase traces, not by hacking, but by prayer. I look at the strip, and the lines on the skin change without my blood. At first, imperceptibly, then obviously. That is impossible. It violates the artifact's own rules, it showed me. I make a new cut, let blood touch the skin, and the scheme seems to come to itself. It listens to me, again, and immediately it yields a new line containing a word I do not use in my protocols. Parasite. The parasite is not in the patient's body. The parasite is in my ritual. It is embedded so deeply in the sequence that it looks like part of the truth. That is worse than sabotage. Sabotage can be cut out, but a piece of truth that has disguised itself as a lie is harder to cut out because the hand will hesitate. I begin an interrogation within myself. I ask questions I do not want to answer. When did I first believe the artifact was leading me to knowledge and not to a cage? When did I stop checking its hints? When did I start waiting for the scheme to praise me with a new line? I realize the parasite feeds not on iron and not on blood. It feeds on my addiction to meaning. The patient begins to dream. It is absurd because I left him no room for dreams. I learn it not from him, but from sensors that record surges of activity where there should be only pain. The dreams smell of the warp. The warp dislikes direct connections, but adores gaps. That means I left a gap. That means the scheme made me leave it. I no longer feel like a master. I feel like a tool. I tried to crush that feeling with familiar pride, but pride does not work when the enemy writes with your own hands. Part 5. The double cut. A hunt inside the forge. I do not hunt people. People are too simple. They leave traces because they want to be seen. I hunt regularities, repeating patterns, cycles that appear where they should not. The parasite in my ritual could not be a living creature. It must be logic. So I must catch it in the moment it makes a choice. I build a trap where the trap becomes the prayer itself. I rewrite the litanies, change the order of words, change the intervals, place pauses where there used to be steady sequence. I want to force the parasite to show itself. I wire sensors not to servitors, but to the pauses between their commands. I watch not the result, but the shadow of intention. The strip is nearby. It remains calm, as if it knows nothing about the parasite. That composure makes me want to strike it with a tool and see if it bleeds. I do not. I want truth too much. The desire for truth has become my new chain. In the trap, something strange appears. The parasite reacts not to changes in code, but to changes in me. When I doubt, it grows more active. When I am confident, it quiets. That means it is not merely embedded in the ritual, it is linked to my state. It lives in my attention as in a nutrient medium. I read the lines on the skin again and see the scheme included, a place for the parasite from the start. Not as a mistake, as a module. I begin to grasp the design. The artifact does not want me to defeat the parasite. It wants me to accept it, integrate it, make it part of myself. Because the parasite is not an enemy. The parasite is a second voice that will make me suitable for the final function. In that moment, I feel fear for the first time. Not fear of death. Fear of losing authorship. Fear that my will be rewritten as a protocol, and I will not even notice when it happens. Part 6. A key of flesh. Assembling the body. I always believe the body is a consumable. If it breaks, you replace it. If it obstructs, you reduce it. If it cannot bear knowledge, you reinforce it. A simple ethic of a craftsman who long ago stopped believing in a soul. But now, the scheme demands I acknowledge the body again, because the body becomes the bearer of the key. The instruction on the skin describes implantation not for the patient. For me, it demands self-dissection, an exact sequence of cuts so as not to damage an old nerve I never considered important. It demands I place the node so it reacts not to electricity, but to regret. That word appears again in the structure, and I rage because it does not belong to machines. I prepare for surgery on myself the way I would prepare for surgery on a titan, without extra drama. I restrain the body, cut pain, leave only pressure because I need to know where I am. I place the strip beside me, the bone of the Omnissiah. It looks calm, but the lines pulse faintly, as if the artifact already counts me as its own. The first cut is easy. That is always troubling. The second cut takes effort, as if the tissue resists not the blade, but meaning. I secure the node, connect the forbidden component to my nervous network, and in the same instant I feel a new rhythm inside my head. Not a thought, a rhythm, as if someone added another metronome to my mind. The strip unfolds further. It reveals a layer I could not see before. There are no weapon formulas there and no Titan schematics. There is a diagram of a link between a man and the Forge world, like a key and a lock. And at the center of that diagram stands me. Not as master, but as an element, a conductor, a bone. I look at my reflection in metal. Half the face is still mine, half already Chujaya, because a calm appears in my eyes that I never had, the calm of one who has accepted his role. I understand this calm is more dangerous than panic, because it makes submission pleasant. Part 7. Revelation, the bone of the Omnissiah. The last layer of text does not manifest at once. It needs time, as if the artifact wants to make sure I will not turn aside. I do not turn aside. I have gone too far. I read the scheme and it becomes clear as an order. The bone of the Omnissiah is not an artifact for knowledge. It is a mechanism of selection. It chooses a master proud enough to think he commands the process and hungry enough not to stop when he realizes the opposite. It grows a key out of him. It replaces his inner dialogue with a second voice that does not argue. It guides. The parasite was not an error. It was training. I understand that somewhere in the depths of the Forge world there is a node, an ancient intellect, sleeping among reactors and prayers. It cannot be hacked, and it cannot be awakened by force. It accepts only the one who has become the right shape, the right bone, the right conductivity, the right degree of loss. And now I stand at the threshold of that depth, not because I was invited, but because I was prepared. I hear the work of the Forge world like breathing. I feel its hunger. It is not hungry for flesh. It is hungry for meaning. It needs a voice that will speak on behalf of the machine so that people will think it was their choice. And I understand the most unpleasant detail. I already know how to speak like that. I did it all my life when I convinced people to lie on my table and become better. I did it when I convinced myself the choice was mine. Part 8. Finale. Choice. Choice has always been my favorite illusion. I used to believe freedom is a set of tools, not morality. But now the choice is real because both paths lead to loss. If I accept the role of the key, I will go into the heart of the Forge world and give it my mind. I will become the voice that will sound through pipes, through servitors, through titans. I will receive knowledge no living thing deserves. I will turn into a function, and my personality will become only an interface. That is power, and that is death, disguised as apotheosis. If I break the chain, I must destroy the relic. Not hide it, not dismantle it, not reflash it. Destroy it so that not a single line remains, not a single bone mark. That means refusing the final layer of truth that is already almost mine. That means remaining a master without a crown, a craftsman without destiny, a man who will again hear silence and not know what lies beyond it. I look at the strip. I feel it reaching for me through the implant, like through a nerve. I feel the Forge world waiting, and I finally admit what I thought impossible. I am tired, not in body, in will. I make one last check, not with a scanner and not with prayer. I ask myself one question I always considered weak. Do I want to be heard, or do I want to remain myself? And in the silence, where metal usually does not lie, I hear my own answer. One no scheme can rewrite